last Sunday? Pastor Mallory described it to us. And as usual, she reminded us of her sermon in her Monday morning e-blast. I quote, "Amidst terror and hopelessness and difficulty and grief, there are still possibilities. The good bones of this good world are worth investing in. And it is our job to find all the places new life is peeking through." Today's story from the book of Acts feels to me like a follow-up to Mallory's thoughts. I want to explore some things that keep us stuck, the chains that bind us. Maybe we can see how to be free of them and how to find all the places new life is peeking through. Usually we read only the part about God's amazing release, or Paul's amazing release from jail, omitting the verses about how he got there. If there is a story anywhere in Scriptures that shines a light on the chains in our 21st century world, it's this one. I want to retell it in my own words. Paul and Silas are still in Philippi, that Greek city where they had met Lydia beside the river. On their way to worship, they're met by a slave girl acting out and getting noticed. She's a fortune teller. Her owners make a great deal of money from her fortune telling. She, of course, has no name. She follows Paul and his friends around for several days, calling out, "These men are servants of the Most High God. They're announcing how you can be saved." At first glance, Paul might have been glad for the free advertising. She is encouraging people to listen to his message. But she won't stop. And it's not the kind of attention Paul wants. Enough is enough. Ignoring her has not made her go away. Paul finally loses his cool and demands that the evil spirit come out of her. She's now free of the evil spirit, but she is still a slave. Her owners are furious. Today, a lawsuit would be immediately filed. Her owners grab Paul and Silas, drag them into the public square. They might have accused them of destruction of property, making their slave useless for fortune telling. But the owners raise the ante and accuse them instead of being political subversives, daring to promote Jewish customs which would undermine the Roman order. And they whip up the crowd. Not the first time a crowd has been used to get Roman officials to take action. Remember Good Friday? Paul and Silas are beaten and thrown into jail. The jailer is ordered to make sure they are so secure. So he puts them in an inner cell and fastens their feet with chains. About midnight, Paul and Silas are singing hymns, and the other prisoners are listening. Yeah, in a dark cell, chained up, bruised and bleeding from the beating, they are singing Suddenly there is an earthquake which shakes things up. The chains fall off the prisoners, all the doors open, but the building does not collapse. The jailer, assuming that he has lost not only his job but his head, makes a move to take his life. "Wait," says Paul, "we're all here." The jailer calls for a light so he can see for himself, and then falls trembling at Paul's feet. "What must I do to be saved?" "Just believe," says Paul. "Believe in the Lord Jesus." The jailer listens to Paul's message about Jesus. I wonder what Paul said. Or is it maybe less about what he says and more about how he treats the jailer? The jailer then invites Paul and Silas to his house, where he washes their wounds and where Paul baptizes him and his family, and they eat dinner together. This is the fourth passage in a row after Easter where eating together is included. I wonder, is the Easter season all about eating together, which we're going to do after worship? Next morning, some messengers come with an order to let the prisoners go. The jailer tells them that they may leave, and he blesses them on their way. "No way," says Paul. "We were not found guilty, but we were whipped and jailed, and we are Roman citizens. Now they want to send us away secretly, trying for a cover-up? Let those officials themselves come out and apologize to us." The officials decide that an apology really is their best course of action. At least they don't have to fend off the media. Paul and Silas then leave the jail and go to Lydia's house. Where? Lydia's house. The Gentile seller of purple who gathered at the river to share a faith journey with friends and was joined by Paul and Silas. What are we to make of this story with all of its fascinating details? One thing I see is a movement from captivity to freedom, a familiar theme in the scriptures, and not just in the jail scene. The slave girl is in captivity, both to a controlling spirit of some sort and to her owners. She's not named, but she refuses to be silenced. Her voice is heard. She does not ask to be freed. We don't learn what happened to her. Does she continue as a slave? Or did her owners free her because she's now worthless as a fortune teller? Did she maybe find a new life, not controlled by the evil spirit? We don't know. An unnamed voice. Her owners are captive too. They're captive to using abusive power to control another for profit. They don't want freedom from this state of affairs. Do they see a new way after this experience? Or do they become captive to anger and resentment after losing their way of making a living? We don't know. Sometimes we like, or at least we are used to, our chains, right? Wish I didn't have to say that, but it's true. Sometimes we like, or at least we are used to, the things that keep us chained. Paul and Silas are captives, jailed for taking action. But in a way, they're free, even while captive, free to sing and pray. Their lives are in the hands of others, but somehow their spirits are not. I think they're learning too, learning to include Roman jailers, learning to draw the circle wide, and learning about a God who is full of surprises. The jailer is a captive too, trapped by a job that demands careful management of the jail. His own life is at risk if he fails. We might also say that the Roman officials are captive to their fears of mob violence and any hint of subversion of Roman power. Their job is to maintain control in the Roman province where they are stationed. Chains of captivity everywhere in this story, everywhere in our world, and everywhere in our lives. In studying this story, I identified 4 different kinds of chains. The girl might represent all those who are captive to mental illness, obsessions, addictions, anything that seems to have control over behavior or emotions, leaving the real person trapped inside. We might add PTSD, brain injuries, childhood or sexual abuse, or the emotional traumas after a mass shooting. Persons possessed. Our society doesn't invest much in the treatment of these people, and they're often as nameless as the slave girl. Chains. Nor is it unusual to see people taking advantage of others, using them to make money for their own pleasure. Human trafficking, pornography, misuse of migrants, mass incarceration. Where is the outrage? It's easy to judge the owners of the slave girl. Much harder to see ourselves, to acknowledge our complicity in keeping things the way they are. And then there is politics. Chains of ideology, chains of power, chains of wanting to win at all costs, or our economic system that keeps many folks down no matter how hard they work. And then there are chains like the chains of the jailer. A job with major risks. Or the chains of a job with hours that drag on and on, with work that is not fulfilling at all. Or work where you can't seem to make anybody happy and you come home feeling miserable. Or any number of personal chains, family situations, financial concerns, fear of failure, old angers and resentments, old shame or fear. We could go on and on. Chains. What happens if we read, "What must we do to be saved?" Not about saving our souls, but about breaking free of these chains? What was the jailer asking for? Save me from the anger of my bosses, get me out of the pickle I'm in. And then he discovers it's something more. What if it's more about being free to be who we are as children of God, and free to wash the wounds of another? Free to be who we are as children of God. There is an exorcism that doesn't happen in this story. The girl is freed of her demon. Her owners have a choice to change. The jailer is baptized and may well show up at Lydia's house. Paul manages to embarrass some Roman officials, perhaps, when he makes them apologize. But nothing happens that breaks the chains of a culture that's afraid of foreign ways, built on a profit motive with little regard for the welfare of others, and designed to keep the powers that be in place. So I want to ask, what must we do to be freed, to be saved from these kinds of change? How do we get out of these entanglements, of which we are so much a part that sometimes we can't even see the chains that are there? In my imagination, these issues are chasing us as Christians, just like the young slave girl was dogging Paul and Silas. Was she making fun of them? Was she daring them to prove it? Or was she maybe, just maybe, hoping that they did have a message that would save, that really could break the chains that bound her and us? We still have those questions, and all of those chains are still at work. These questions are hard. We can work to change the systems that chain us up, and we must. But Paul does not wave a magic wand. We are still asking, how can we be saved? How can we be freed of the chains that bind us? How can we help save others? There are no easy answers. Paul does set an example for us, though. When he is held by the chains, he sings. He sings his faith. He sings his hope. He sings his prayer. When he is freed, he goes back to Lydia's house to regroup, to heal, to consult with his cohorts. He goes to his faith community for support and healing, and then he goes on to continue his journey to the next towns to share the same message. He puts the chaos of these events behind him. His mission goes forward. His message about God's saving love is spoken again and again and again. He will face dangers and beatings and jail again, but he keeps on keeping on, propelled by his experience of God's grace and strengthened by the faith communities that he nurtures and that in turn nourish him. That's what we're called to do. Address the demons. Use our voices. Break the chains when we can. And keep proclaiming the gospel message stay on the journey, even when doing so is risky and hard, one day at a time, nurturing and encouraging each other. And sometimes when we're stuck, what we can do is sing. Even the other prisoners listened to Paul sing. Our message can save. Easter tells us it already has. So let's sing. Our hymn is "Won't You Let Me Be Your Servant," number 539. Our community here at Vista Grande has a lot in common with those who gathered at Lydia's house.